I want to show you one of my favorite places to get data sets for machine learning. It's the UCI Machine Learning Repository. Go ahead and type that in, UCI Machine Learning Repository, and then click on it. And what you see at the top are popular data sets. I often use some of these ones. The iris is really clean, the heart disease, very famous. Shows you the number of rows here, the number of columns. This is a machine learning type, which we can learn about later. What I want to do is look at this adult data set, and what it is, you can see it's also called the income data set, whether an individual exceeds 50K a year in income based on census data. And so that's what you're trying to predict is, can you predict somebody's income? So let's click on that one. And you can see now it shows, hey, this is being recorded in 2025. So this is, almost like 30 years ago. Probably that number would be much higher by now to make it more balanced. And what you can go ahead and do is click on this import in Python option. All right, let's do that. This is newer from the UCI Machine Learning Repository as of the last couple of years. First, you want to install the UCI repo. So copy that in and then go into Colab, go into a new notebook, and you're going to put that in there. But you want to put in so this is a command. It's kind of like a command line in programming. And to do a command line, you actually want to put this quotation, the exclamation first. So I also like to put it all in the same coding cell so that if you do this later, you have it. And we're going to copy the rest of that in. Okay. And we will go ahead and press Shift Enter. Okay, so this is the way they set it up for you. And what I'm going to do is a couple of things to make one modification I want to show you. And so at the beginning, it's going to run this first line, and you'll see information from the output, like downloading, da-da-da, and then it'll show you everything else. It does these printouts about the data, and I think we're not too concerned about that. They have an X and a Y, which is standard for machine learning, which we will talk about. Something that I want to do is actually merge these. And so I think I want to do df equals, I think you can do just x dot merge y, and then I'll just put this in a different coding cell. So this completed. And let's see if this works. df dot head. And no, it didn't work. Is it join? I think it'll work straight out if it's done right. I get join. I get the merge and the join mixed up. So if we look in the far right column, income, this is what you're trying to predict here. And so this would be the normal kind of DF as a whole. And I want to look at this as a normal DF as a whole, because what we're going to do now is prepare it for machine learning. And so we'll call this ML prep census dataset. I'll put census dataset first. Census dataset ML prep. Okay, first of all, what does it mean to prepare data for machine learning? It means really two things. It's one, you've got to clear null values. If you have null values, it will break. Okay, so that's the first thing we're going to do. Okay, so how do we figure this out? Well, I usually start with df.info because you get more information. It's going to be helpful later. And you can see now these are not all 48,842. We've got some values that are less than that, indicating that there are null values present. Okay, so we have to fix those. And so we have choices with what we do to actually fix them. And so you can also see we have a different types of columns, and we're also going to want to change the column types for machine learning, because number two, I will tell you, is that they all need to be numbers. So we're going to fix that as well. Well, let's start with some of these null values. First of all, there's another way to see it. So df dot, I think it's is null dot sum. Okay, this is a nice little method. You can do this, by the way. It's like stringing methods together. And okay, I think this needs parentheses. And now you can see it shows the columns of the null values and how many there are. Now, if it was like one column and it was almost all null values, you could delete that column. Okay. I don't think it would be worth deleting any of these columns. We'll look at deleting some other columns later. And so the next question would be, well, how do you fill in the null values? What do you fill them in with? Okay. Well, I think you want to look at the column first. Let's start with the working class. So df working class. Okay, start typing it in. And, you can just run it if you want. And you can see, and it shows, kind of cool, it shows one of the null values here. Okay, so what should we, if we're going to replace the null value, believe it or not, it's standard in machine learning to replace null values, because the idea is, you know what? All those other columns are valuable. I don't want to lose the information. So what do? Well, you could make a new working class that's I don't know, okay? That is legitimate. Or you could actually change it with whatever is the most common one. Well, the most common one is actually going to be what's called the mode. So what happens if we put in mode here? Let's see. You can see it's actually shows private. So most people in this data set, their working class is private, meaning they work in the private sector, not in the public sector. Okay. If you want to see all the working classes, that can be interesting, right? It's good to ask and answer questions, right? Like what we want dot value counts for that, okay? So we're learning about our data set, and you can see by far and away private is the most. So I think replacing them with private. We also have these question marks. So this is sort of interesting. This can happen when there is like a misinterpretation of data, because you probably shouldn't have question marks and null values. If you don't know, it's better to like keep it as a null value. We can keep this as its own. It's unidentified. The null value ones, which this is one, okay? And you can see that it shows us here that there are 963 of them, and that is not the case here. There's more than that, okay? And so, I mean, technically, looking at it, right, it's an open question. Like, do we put them in the private or put them with this question mark? I think maybe actually the question mark's better since it's here. So how would we do that? Okay, so what we have to first do is identify the column. Okay, so it's working class. And what we're going to do now is dot fill in A. That fills the null values with what? Okay, we have all these NaNs, and we can replace them with, in this case, we can actually use this. Okay, it's good to put your mouse in there. Like, is there a space in there? No. Command C, Command V. Now, after we run that, okay, it should change, okay? And there are different ways we could check the change. I think it could be fun to just check this again. Let's see, has it been modified? If so, that, right, the question mark should go up. And let's try it, and you can see, okay, it didn't go up. Okay, so maybe this didn't, oh yeah, I forgot something. You need to reassign it, okay? So that kind of fills it, but it doesn't save it. And there are some different ways that you can save it. I like to just say, hey, let's reassign it. Okay, and so what it's gonna do, it's only gonna change here the null values. Let's try that. And you can see now it's gone up, and we'll also see that the sum has changed. Okay, so we've taken care of that column. We have two other columns. Okay, we can type it again, or we can get up here and see that occupation is another one, and native country. Okay, so let's take a look at occupation. I don't know. I wonder about the occupation. So let's try. I think it's good to check the value counts on these. Now, in some cases, when you have numerical ones, this is a lot easier. You could just try like replace it with the mean or the median, but you don't have a mean or a median here. Once again, we have the classic question mark. And I think in this one, you definitely want question mark, because like you don't have anything you don't want to change it all to prof specialty. I mean, right? You have a lot of different types. And I think this is the reality. You often don't know. I think that's fine. Okay, so we'll actually do the same thing here. And we'll do something different on the last one. And so instead of working class here, we're looking at occupation. Okay, let's just assume that this one works. And then we need to, let's do this after we change it. Let's do this is null dot sum dot, and then remember we need the parentheses. Okay, so we're making another correction. And now we can see the only one left with no values is in fact native country. And let's just use the mode here. So if we go to, let's try it. So we're going to do df native country. And we want to change it. So we're filling the null values with the mode of this column. Now the mode, okay, we showed before, right? It just gives us, a pandas series. And I think there's an issue with this where it's sort of showing up like this. I think we actually need, we'll check it. I think we need to put in, where is it? Let me show you. Okay, if you just put this in, okay? This is the United States. Most people in here are from the United States. But what if you put this in? I'm trying to get the value here, United States, and there's the value. Do you see the difference? Okay, let me do that again. If you just go mode, it gives you a series, which isn't what you actually want. You want the actual value, which is the first element, okay? So what we want to do is dot fill in A with what? It's with the mode of that column. Okay, so this is going to be a lot because you got to put it in there. So this is actually what we're putting in. It's the whole thing there, right? That's simply United States. So that's how you would basically put something in. Okay, so we press Shift Enter. And now you can try this too. You can do df.isNull. You can sum twice, .sum, and we're hoping for a 0 here. This will sum all the columns. Oh, because I left off the parentheses again. Excuse me. Ta-da! All null values have been cleared. That's step number 1. If your null values are all clear to begin with, you don't have to do this. Okay. Step number 2 is all columns need to be numeric. And this is not that. I mean, you can see that if you look at the data set. We've been working with strings, right? There's not a lot here. So first of all, let me just go over a couple things. This education and this education num are they're the same. So this is like one style of converting what's called categorical columns, categories, right? Well, if bachelor's equates to 13 and high school grad equates to 9, 11th equates to 7, okay, these already have a numerical equivalence. We can get rid of this column. Okay, so let's do that. I do it like this. Delete df education. Is it capital? You know, you can go back. Yeah, no. Okay. And then you definitely want to check, right? Like, did it actually delete? We can look at the last 5 rows for the fun of it. So see something different. You can see it has been deleted. Okay, great. So how do we deal with these other columns? So believe it or not, there's something sort of fascinating that it's called one-hot encoding. And this is shown to be sort of the best method when you're transforming categorical columns to numerical normally. So let's just pick one of the columns as an example, like working class, right? So we've got private, question mark, self-employed. If you give these numbers like 0, 1, and 2, you're suggesting that self-employed is further from private than unknown is, and that's not true. So what one-hot encoding does is it says, okay, what we're going to do, we're going to shift this column to be like working class private. In this case, we get 1, 0, 1, 1, 0. It's only ones when it's private. And then we're going to have a new column for working class question mark. And that's just ones if it's there. So what this one-hot encoding does is it transforms your columns so that it takes all the categorical values and basically it's going to give you a 1 if it is in fact, how would I put it, present, and a 0 if it's absence. And a standard way of doing this is using pandas, PD get dummies, which will work for most cases, okay? So here's how you do it. You're going to reassign your data frame. Well, you could change it if you're not sure, then you can keep the original. Okay, and you're going to apply, basically it's a pandas method, pd.getDummies. Okay, it's like this. And what you do is you do it on your data frame. Okay, and this would save it. Now, just to show you, look, PD is underlined here because we use the UCI machine learning repository. It has not been imported yet, which is rare for me. So first I'm going to import pandas as PD. And then let's just look at, thank you, Colette, for the underline. Let's look at it. And you'll see what I mean. Okay, so what it's showing you, as I forgot they made these changes. So first it shows numerical columns, great. And now it's actually showing false and true, where it's true instead of zeros and ones. So we just have to make a modification here. But you can see it's showing the individual types of classes. And it actually makes the data frame huge, right? Because you can see in the United States, that's most of the cases. And these certainly balance each other out. So how are there two columns at the end here? How do we sort of fix this? Oh, interesting. It's not labeled consistently. That's kind of fascinating. Okay, so how do we fix this? The true false. Well, I forget. And so what I'm going to do here is simply type it in. Okay, type it in. Let's get in Google. We'll get to the official documentation. Okay, so we type that in, and here's the official documentation comes up. Great. Drop first we're going to use, and does it say dtype maybe, I think is what we want. We can always scroll down to see if they have an example where it's converted to zeros and ones. Yes, we want to change the dtype to a float. Okay, so come back and we put in dtype equals float. And we're also going to do this other one, which is drop first. Why would you drop the first one? Well, let me show you why. You end up with I think it was drop first, yeah. So you end up with the following. Now this was repeated, right? But imagine that it wasn't. Well, if it was only for the 50K one, imagine it was just these two. You don't need them both. One clearly implies the other, right? That's in this case. But if you look at the countries, if you drop the first, how would that work? Well, you would lose one of them, okay? And if you lose one of them, what's going to happen, right? What's going to happen is that you're going to end up with a case where all of the rows of, say, Taiwan are going to be zero in all the other cases. And so, is that better or not to have, I think testing out both possibilities can be helpful because the information is actually preserved, right? Zeros are meaningful when you run the machine learning algorithm. I think I'm just going to take it off. Okay, so let's do this and let's resave the data frame and move on. And I'm going to show you the difference. We're going to look at df.info next, okay? And you can see now you just get a ton of columns. And that's sort of the trade-off is you get all these columns, but look at the two things we need. We need everything to be non-null and to be a data type of integer or float. And after all that work, we now have it. And if it seems excessive here, well, we're only going to use one of these four. And the countries, it's sort of interesting. I mean, we don't have enough information, but you can of course tweak these to make it, if you think there's a better way. Okay. So we now have our final data frame, but we're left with one important piece, and that's establishing X and Y. Okay. So X is the input to your machine learning model. And you could say this should be all relevant columns, okay? And then what is Y? And let me highlight something else here. Look, I do not make up conventions, okay? I go with the conventions, and there's good reason for them. What I just wrote is intentional. X is uppercase, Y is lowercase. Why? X is all relevant columns, plural. It's always more than one. Y is the single column that you are trying to predict. Okay, so Y is 1. So this is your input to your machine learning model, and this is your output. So in this case, what's the input and the output? Well, X would be everything except for the last 4 columns, okay? Because the last 4 are what we're basically trying to predict. So we would go X equals df dot iloc, let's get it by index, all the rows, okay, you can just put a colon in, and then for all the columns but the last 4, start at the first, go all the way up to and exclude the negative 4th. See, negative 1, 2, 3, 4. And then let's, of course, check it, right? Make sure. Just look at the first 5 rows. And you can see this looks good to start with. If we go to the end, it cuts off with those, what we're trying to predict. Okay, so what about Y now? Well, Y is just we could really take any of these columns as Y, like any of these 4, right? Like less than or equal to 50K, great. I mean, they're all like equivalent. Does anybody make exactly 50K? To make it simple, I'll just take the last one, okay? Greater than 50K. So that's only that one, right? And so Y equals df.iloc, okay, bracket, all the rows, comma, and then just the last column. And again, you want to check it to make sure. Press Shift Enter, and you can see it's what we're trying to predict, whether someone has income of over 50K. So that's what you need to prepare data for machine learning. Okay, just to recap, you must clear all the null values. We spent some time doing that. And if it's numerical dot, like we did, filling it with the mode, okay? Well, for numerical ones, you want to use stuff like dot median, the value in the middle, right? Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, all your columns must be numeric, and this PD get dummies is a great way to sort of do like an all-in-one. Don't worry if you have like thousands of columns. The models can handle that. The models are used to millions of rows and thousands of columns. And I guess the final piece is establishing your X and your Y, right? And this is very important, okay? You've got to make sure that you don't have overlapping columns. Because just to give you an idea, like, let's say like I did like -3 here instead, okay? I'm not going to change it, so I want the code to be right. What would happen? You would get one of those less than or equal to 50K columns at the top. Well, if you have that in your X, it's always going to give 100% predictions because it's going to easily be able to predict your Y, okay? And that's a warning too I will give you. If you get 100% predictions correct in your machine learning, everything's perfect. There's probably a mistake somewhere. But that's your prep. That's our introduction to pandas. You're now ready to build machine learning models.